Welcome back to The Explainer. So, if you're building a business in 2026, you already know the landscape has completely shifted, right? I mean, think back just 5 years ago. Hiring top-tier international talent was basically a luxury. It was reserved for these massive, well-funded corporations with literal armies of lawyers. But today, even small, bootstrap teams are scaling globally right from day one. You want a rockstar developer in Europe or a brilliant designer in South America? You can just hire them. But the absolute headache of doing that legally and efficiently? Yeah, that hasn't magically disappeared. So today we're setting up the ultimate evaluation. We are taking a totally honest, data-driven look at the two absolute giants dominating the space, Deel versus Remote. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into our agenda. To fairly judge these two heavyweights, we're going to use a structured scorecard of battlegrounds. We'll start with 1, the global hiring bridge. Then 2, infrastructure philosophies. 3, the true cost of scaling. 4, legal risk and IP. 5, payouts and talent experience. And finally, 6, the final verdict.
Moving right along to Section 1, the Global Hiring Bridge. Subtitle, How EORs Work.
So, before we get into the weeds, what exactly are Deel and Remote? Well, they're what's known as an employer of record, or EOR. Think of an EOR as a legal bridge. It's an entity that essentially steps in, hires, and pays international employees through its own local companies, right on your behalf. This is absolutely crucial, folks, because it means you get to skip the agonizing, incredibly expensive process of setting up your own foreign subsidiaries. It is, for all intents and purposes, the ultimate legal shortcut for modern businesses.
Let's see how this actually plays out in the real world. Imagine your company finds this absolutely incredible lead software engineer, but she happens to live in Paris. Now, if you did this the old-fashioned way, you'd spend months setting up a French subsidiary, paying wild setup fees, hiring local accountants, and trying to decipher their 35-hour workweek laws. It's a nightmare. But with an EOR, it's so much simpler. Step 1, you find that Paris engineer. Step 2, the EOR's already existing French entity legally hires them on paper. Step 3, the EOR runs the local French payroll, pays the French taxes, and handles the pension. And Step 4, that brilliant engineer logs in every single day and works exclusively for you. You just pay the EOR one simple flat invoice every month. Easy, right?
All right, to set the stage, here is our high-level scanning matrix. As you scan the columns, with Remote and Deel explicitly labeled down there at the bottom, you'll notice something interesting. They actually tie on base EOR pricing. But man, they radically diverge when it comes to infrastructure scale, how they handle legal risk, and how they actually pay out talent. We're going to break all of these down one by one.
Which brings us to Section 2, Infrastructure Philosophies. Subtitle, Purist versus Pragmatist.
This is where the tale of these two companies really begins. Look at Remote on the bottom left. They represent the purist model. They literally built their reputation by refusing to use third-party partners. They own their entire stack, meaning over 80 fully owned entities globally. That means absolutely zero middlemen between you, the EOR, and your employee. It's very slow, very steady. Now look over at Deel on the bottom right. They went with a pragmatic, highly aggressive expansion model. They scaled incredibly fast by initially partnering with local HR companies, which let them instantly offer coverage in over 150 countries. Now they've shifted to buying up those partners, boasting over 100 fully owned entities while still keeping that partner network for hard-to-reach jurisdictions. So it really comes down to this. Do you demand an unbroken, fully owned chain, or do you need maximum global reach at blistering speed?
Let's jump into Section 3, the true cost of scaling. Subtitle, Breaking Down the Math.
Because let's face it, we can't do a proper comparison without looking at the bottom line. First up, contractor management. If you run a lean startup, you're probably using a ton of freelancers, and you rely on these platforms to generate contracts and pay invoices in just a click. Well, Remote comes in highly competitive at just $29 a month per active contractor.
Deel, on the other hand, charges $49 a month per active contractor. Now, you might be thinking it's just $20, but that difference is actually huge at scale. To put that into perspective, if you have a team of 15 contractors, picking Remote over Deel is going to save you almost $3,600 a year. Literally, that is real money for a bootstrapping founder. Deel justifies this higher price tag with a radically different payout engine, which we'll get to in a sec, but strictly on the basic math for contractors, Remote definitely takes the lead here.
But what about actual full-time employees? Well, for full-time EOR hires, where the platform handles all the local taxes and benefits, the two platforms actually tie at an industry-standard baseline. As you can see with Remote on the left and Deel on the right, they both start at $599 per employee per month billed annually. But here's a pro tip. If you're bringing volume, like say you're hiring 10 or 20 people right out of the gate, do not accept the sticker price. Both platforms will absolutely negotiate custom enterprise rates with you.
All right, moving right along to Section 4, Legal Risk and IP. Subtitle, Protection Priorities. When you hire globally, your two biggest, most terrifying nightmares are usually losing your intellectual property or getting audited and fined by a foreign government. And this brilliantly illustrates how these two tackle those exact fears from completely different angles. Over on the left, we have Remote. Their fully owned entity model gives them an unbroken line of IP transfer. So, if you are a deeply paranoid CTO guarding highly complex source code and prepping for brutal VC due diligence, Remote's maximum IP protection is going to sound really, really good. Now look at the right side for Deel. They offer a premium add-on called Deel Shield. Now, contractor misclassification, where a government decides your freelancer is actually a full-time employee and smacks you with back taxes, is a massive day-to-day risk. With Deel Shield, Deel assumes total legal liability. If you're audited, they fight it, they pay the fines. It's an incredibly practical defense for a super common problem.
Let's switch gears to Section 5, Payouts and Talent Experience. Subtitle, The End User.
So far, we've looked at everything from the admin perspective, right? But let's pivot to the daily operational reality of the actual talent doing the work, the folks receiving the money. If you have ever been an international contractor, you know this miserable reality all too well. Waiting for a traditional Swift wire transfer to hit your bank app is just awful. Intermediary banks take these random, unpredictable fees out of your hard-earned paycheck, you get hit with terrible exchange rates, and you literally spend 3 days refreshing your account wondering where your money went. Remote handles payouts reliably and cleanly for sure, but they do lean heavily on these traditional local currency bank transfers.
Now, check out Deel's payout engine. This is where Deel really attempts to just completely overwhelm the competition. They actually separate the client's funding process from the talent's withdrawal process. So an international contractor on Deel can pull their money out in over 120 currencies via local bank transfers to avoid those nasty Swift fees. Or, get this, they can push it to PayPal, Payoneer, or Revolut. They can even withdraw directly in crypto to Coinbase or Binance, or just use an instant Deel card to spend their balance right away. Giving global talent that much control over their own money, that is a real game changer for retention. And what happens when the inevitable goes wrong? Like a payout blocker hits, or you get a scary tax letter in the mail? Here is how their support philosophies differ, with Remote explicitly labeled on the left and Deel on the right. Remote leans hard on its in-house, local legal experts. If you have a deeply specific question about, say, statutory maternity leave in Brazil, Remote is going to give you a legally bulletproof, heavily researched answer. But it might take a bit longer going through a ticketing system. Deel, on the other hand, prioritizes operational speed. They rely heavily on 24/7 in-app chat and dedicated account managers. So if a massive payroll blocker happens at 2 a.m. across time zones, Deel's whole goal is fast, immediate human resolution. Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the final verdict. Subtitle, Which Matches Your Roadmap.
We've covered the infrastructure, the math, the legal defenses, and the end-user experience. It is time to bring the whole shebang together for an objective summary of this explainer. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that neither platform is bad, they just serve entirely different strategic needs. Impartially speaking, looking at Remote on the bottom left, they are best suited for deeply engineered SaaS companies where unbroken IP ownership is literally the highest priority, or for bootstrap teams relying heavily on contractors who desperately need to save every dollar on that $29 monthly fee. Now, looking at Deel on the bottom right, they are best for companies prioritizing rapid global scaling speed, those who really want the practical day-to-day defense of Deel Shield against misclassification, and companies that want to offer their talent a huge variety of flexible payout options.
And that brings us to the ultimate question you have to answer for your own team. Which infrastructure philosophy actually aligns with your 2026 hiring roadmap? Are you the slow and steady purist or the rapid, flexible pragmatist? Review the data we've covered, weigh it against your own strategic goals, and make the choice that empowers your global team. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning out there.